Just when I thought the truth couldn't possibly get any uglier, the floor gave way completely. Maddie reached down, guiding Carter's hand to the slight, barely the curve of her lower stomach. She looked at him like she was presenting a crown jewel. But I don't have a ring, Carter. What are we going to do about our baby? Carter frowned, the silence stretching into something suffocating. Then he uttered the most venomous words I had ever heard in my life. Your due date is right around Camilla's. When the time comes, I'll switch the babies. I'll give yours to her. And her baby? Maddie whispered. I'll drop it off at a fire station or an orphanage. I told you our child would be the sole heir to this empire, Maddie. I'm not letting anyone stand in his way. Carter said it with the casual dismissal of someone throwing out junk mail. His eyes darkened then, intensely serious. But Camilla can never know. I can't lose her. With that, he pulled Maddie flush against him again, his movements turning punishing and rapid. My heart felt like it was being beaten with a blunt instrument, the pain radiating outward until I was entirely numb. He was never the perfect gentleman I thought he was. He was just saving his passion for someone else. But how could he be this deeply evil? To throw away our own flesh and blood? Hot tears slid down my cheeks into the dark carpet. Instinctively, my hands moved to cover my stomach, shielding the 3-month-old life growing inside me. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the windows, the sickening noises finally stopped. Carter dressed himself, adjusting his cuffs before walking over to the sofa where I lay feigning sleep. He dropped to his knees, his touch impossibly gentle as he brushed the stray hairs from my forehead and wiped a dried tear from the corner of my eye. My sweet girl, he whispered softly. I'll love you forever, just like they did. Those hands. Those same hands that had just been all over another woman's body. A few minutes later, he led a trembling, legged Maddie out the front door. I dragged myself up from the sofa, my entire body shaking. The sorrow had evaporated, leaving behind a frost so absolute it burned. I pulled out my phone and dialed my best friend, Brooke, a corporate attorney. Brooke, draft the divorce papers. If this was Carter's definition of love, I was going to burn it to the ground, and him along with it. An hour later, I was sitting in a sterile, white hospital room. Doctor, I can't keep the baby. As the cold instruments did their work, my vision blurred with fresh tears. I had prayed for this child for 5 long years. I had begged the universe for a family with Carter. But now I loved this baby too much to bring her into a world where her father would discard her like trash. When I opened my eyes again in the recovery room, the sky outside the window was exploding with brilliant, cascading fireworks. A young nurse walked in to check my vitals, her eyes glued to the window, sighing with dreamy envy. Can you believe that? The CEO of Carter Enterprises bought out the bay for his girlfriend. They've been going off all night. Rumor has it he even bought her a $100 million custom yacht to celebrate her pregnancy. Even the muted TV on the hospital wall was flashing the headline, Tech billionaire lights up the city for mystery girlfriend. On the screen, grainy paparazzi footage showed Maddie leaning into Carter's chest on the deck of a yacht, smiling a sickly sweet, triumphant smile. We had been secretly married for 5 years to protect his corporate image. In all that time, he had never bought me a single extravagant gift. Once, years ago, I had gently hinted that I wanted to watch the New Year's fireworks together. He hadn't even looked up from his laptop. It's just burning money for 5 minutes of noise, Cam. What's the point? I'm not into all that performative romance. He wasn't allergic to romance. I just wasn't the woman he wanted to be romantic for. 2 days later, I buried my parents. That evening, Carter finally came home after a 2-day business trip. Cam, baby, I've been working the police chief non-stop these past 2 days, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. The guy who hit them finally confessed. He's locked up. Your parents can rest in peace now. A heavy, suffocating wave of designer perfume hit my nose. It was Maddie's signature scent. My body trembled violently, a physical rejection of his proximity. Swallowing the bile in my throat, I dodged his lips as they moved toward my neck. I don't feel well. The baby. Carter stiffened. He pulled back, a flicker of genuine panic crossing his features. Cam, did you see the news? The fireworks. I opened my mouth, struggling to form the words to confront him. Before I could, his phone buzzed. It was a custom ringtone, the one reserved just for Maddie. He flipped the screen face down with lightning speed, but not before I caught the contact name. My little trouble. The words stung my exhausted eyes. Carter, I just had a nightmare. Her voice whined through the speaker, breathless and needy. I'm so scared. Can you come over? Without a second of hesitation, his voice melted into liquid velvet. Take a deep breath. I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to me, already grabbing his keys. Don't listen to the tabloids, Cam. Maddie was just having a breakdown over your parents' death. I took her out to distract her. She's like a little sister to me, you know that. What kind of brother fucks his sister on a mahogany table and gets her pregnant? And they were my parents. I was the one who had lost everything. You've been running yourself ragged with the funeral preparations. Get some sleep, he said, already halfway out the door. Maddie's having a panic attack. I need to go check on her. As he rushed out, his wallet slipped from his coat pocket, landing on the hardwood floor. I picked it up. Through blurry, bloodshot eyes, I saw the photo in the ID window. It used to be a picture of us on our college campus. Now it was a Polaroid of him and Maddie, kissing against a sunset. I walked into the living room, took down our framed wedding photo, and methodically smashed the glass, taking a pair of shears to the canvas until it was confetti. I slipped off the wedding band I had worn for 5 years and dropped it into the coffee grounds in the trash can. Then I went upstairs and started packing. Halfway through folding a sweater, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. It was a photo. A man standing in a steamy bathroom, his perfectly sculpted torso bare. A woman's manicured hand was tracing the jagged, faded scar across his abdomen. It was the scar Carter got 5 years ago when he took a knife from me during a mugging. He had been covered in his own blood, gripping my hand with trembling fingers as we waited for the ambulance. I'll always protect you, Cam, he had whispered. The boy who had slain dragons for me had become the monster tearing me apart. I stood there like a ghost, letting the tears fall in silence until the sudden shrill of my ringtone shattered the quiet. It was Maddie, I answered. Her voice was husky, languid, the unmistakable sound of a woman who had just been thoroughly satisfied. Did you ever actually satisfy him, Cam? She purred. He took me 3 times today, and all it took was one phone call for him to drop you in the middle of the night and come running back for more. When I didn't answer, she laughed. It was a sharp, grating sound. Cat got your tongue? Still crying over those old fossils? God, you should have seen it, Cam. The way the semi-truck just crushed them into ground meat. It was so messy. Pure, unadulterated hatred spiked through my veins, turning the blood to ice. 10 years ago, my parents found her freezing by the side of a highway, covered in infections, half dead. They took her in. They raised her. 5 years ago, they even paid out of pocket for her to study abroad. But when she came back last year, everything shifted. Jewelry went missing. When my parents caught her stealing and gently reprimanded her, she threw a hysterical fit, screaming that they always treated her like an outsider, and threatened to slit her wrists. Strange men started sneaking out of her bedroom window. When my parents tried to talk to her about respecting herself and offered to set her up with decent, hard-working guys, she went to the country club and told everyone they were trying to sell her off to old men for money. At first, Carter thought she was out of line too. But then, one night after he came back from a VIP club downtown, his tune changed. I think you guys have Maddie all wrong. She's not a bad kid. She's working bottle service to pay for her masters. Some trust fund kid offered her 10 grand to sleep with him, and she dumped a bottle of champagne over his head. I remembered the faint, intrigued smile playing on Carter's lips when he told me. The kid's got fire. Later, when my parents realized Maddie was beyond saving and threatened to cut her out of the will, she poisoned our elderly golden retriever. When my father, blind with grief and rage, finally raised a hand to discipline her, Carter had stepped in, taking the blow to his own shoulder. Maddie had collapsed against his chest, sobbing beautifully. It's okay, Carter. If they think I'm that toxic, I should have just let the dogs kill me on the streets. I shouldn't have fought back. I used to look at Carter, fiercely defending this broken girl, and think it was a testament to his kind heart. I didn't know they were already sleeping together. You can have Carter, I said into the receiver, my voice dead flat. But I am going to watch you rot in a cell for what you did to my parents. The second the sun came up, I drove to the precinct. They had murdered my family. I was going to make them pay. As I pulled back into the driveway later that morning, Maddie was strolling up the walkway, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. Where have you been, sis? I ignored her, stepping around her toward the front door. Suddenly, she let out a dark, mocking chuckle. What are you going to do now, Cam? She reached out to grab my arm. The second her manicured fingertips brushed my sleeve, she violently threw her own weight backward, stumbling and collapsing hard against the stone pillar of the porch. She shrieked, clutching her stomach as she crumpled to the concrete. I stared at her in shock. Before my brain could even process the performance, a massive force slammed into my shoulder. I was thrown backward, my head cracking sickeningly against the edge of the stone steps. Warm blood instantly gushed down my temple, blinding my left eye. Carter was on his knees, pulling Maddie into his chest, his face pale with a kind of terror I had never seen him direct at me. Maddie, are you okay? She buried her face in his shirt, hyperventilating. I just wanted to comfort her, Carter. She sobbed hysterically, but she called me a whore and said she wanted me dead to avenge them. Carter's face turned to absolute granite. When he looked at me, his eyes were black with disgust. Are you out of your fucking mind? He roared. She lost them too. She's grieving just as much as you are. Apologize to her. No, I didn't even touch her. I gasped, clutching my bleeding head. She threw herself. Maddie wailed louder. Carter, my stomach. It hurt so bad. Carter's pupils dilated. He scooped her up effortlessly. I've got you. We're going to the hospital. Of course he was panicking. She was carrying his precious air. Blood dripped steadily off my chin onto my blouse. Watching him carry another woman away, the pain in my chest finally eclipsed the physical agony of my fractured skull. I literally forgot how to breathe. Carter knew I was a germaphobe. He knew I hated anyone else driving my car. But he kicked open the door to the Range Rover my parents had bought me and laid her in the back seat. As he reversed, his eyes finally caught my reflection in the side mirror, the sheer amount of blood soaking my clothes. The SUV jerked to a violent halt. Get in, he barked through the window. We'll get you patched up. He practically shoved me into the passenger side, but my eyes immediately caught the state of the leather seats. They were scratched and scuffed, and crumpled on the floor mat was a pair of pink lace underwear. Carter snatched them up instantly, his jaw tight as he refused to meet my eyes. It's Maddie's time of the month. She changed in the car the other day and forgot them. Don't be crazy. Looking at his handsome profile, the face that used to make my heart skip a beat knowing he had defiled my car with her, all I felt was a rising tide of physical nausea. Maybe the guilt was eating at him, because out of nowhere, his tone softened. Cam, once the mourning period is over, we're going to have the wedding. The biggest, most beautiful wedding you can imagine. Carter came from nothing. When we got our marriage license, he insisted we keep it quiet. He wanted to wait until he was successful enough to give me a wedding fit for a queen. For 5 years, I pulled every string my family had to get him investors. I stayed up with him through all-nighters until he ended up in the ER with a bleeding ulcer. I helped him build his empire from a garage startup to Carter Enterprises. And the wedding was always pushed back. Always next year. Now, he was finally offering it. I sat completely still, my eyes empty. I don't want it anymore, Carter. His face hardened instantly. Fine. Suit yourself. He didn't look at me again, slamming his foot on the gas and speeding toward the emergency room. The house was empty again. I sat in the driveway, raising a shaking hand to wipe the sticky, cooling blood from my cheek. He wanted to play dirty. Fine. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper I had found under the floor mat while he was distracted, a wire transfer receipt from Maddie's bank account to a known offshore fixer. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. That night, squad cars rolled up to the private hospital. Standing at the end of the sterilized corridor, I watched the detectives walk into Maddie's VIP suite, arrest warrant in hand.